بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد سيد الخلق أجمعين. اللهم ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وارحمنا واهدنا واهد بنا وعافنا وارزقنا وبارك لنا اللهم فيما أعطيتنا وارحمنا وأنت الرحمن وأنت الرحيم وأنت العزيز وأنت الكريم. Inshallah, we continue on today with زاد المعاد في هدى خير العباد, in the seerah or the sayings or the hadith, the guidance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the book is by Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah. Inshallah, we're coming close to the closer of the second juz, the second part of it. Inshallah, we'll be starting with the third right now today, inshallah. So, inshallah, we will be having the final of the second juz, as a few other parts left in it, and we're going to start with number 3, and it changes the entire theme of the hadith and the guidance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam into that part. Inshallah, we're going to be embarking on this portion also as well. We were at the part of the section or the book of فيما يقوله ويفعله من اشتد غضبه. أمره Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that when somebody, what is the order, what is the thing to do? And this is the thing that we started off the last chapter as to what would somebody do when he gets angry and he gets upset. We went through the chapter all the way until the chapter that goes في ألفاظ ما يكره فيما يقال. Alfaz, or things that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam hated or disliked for people to say. We are in this chapter right now. We started with that one all the way straight across, inshallah. ومنها, some of it is that things Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam hated or he disliked for it to be called is تسمية العشاء بالعتمة, وهي تسمية غالبة يهجر فيها لفظ العشاء. This hadith here, hadith number 4 in Sahih Muslim on Abdullah ibn Omar, the period of time where after Maghrib we go into the Isha, this is what we say, Salatul Isha. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam hated for this to be called al-atama. The atama, as a lot of Arabic speakers will say, salah of darkness. And you can see why he's disliked, because you should not be called darkness. This is not about darkness. It's about the period of time where it's called the Asha. And this is what the salah is for. And from it, النهي عن سباب المسلم. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam strictly and strenuously, he prohibited for people to make sabab, to curse at another Muslim, joking or otherwise, for them to cuss or curse at each other. Also in Hadith al-Bukhari, in Hadith Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, in this Hadith al-Sahih, سباب المسلم فسوق وقتاله كفر. He makes sibab when you curse or you cuss at another Muslim. It is fusuq. You're going outside of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're no longer a Muslim, or you've forfeited part or whole of your Islam. Also, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam hated for people أن يتناجى اثنان دون الثالث. And this hadith أخرجه في البخاري also. And this is part of the adab, part of the khuluq. It's for two people to talk amongst each other secretly, while a third one is with them. He's currently physically with them, and yet he is not joining them with the with the conversation. And he disliked that, and he says that prohibited, something prohibited. Also, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, part of his hadith is that what he said, أن تخبر المرأة زوجها بمحاسن امرأة أخرى. For a wife to tell her husband with a physical description or the beauty of another woman. And this also hadith in Bukhari, in hadith Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu. A woman described mafatin, the beauty or the or the body or physical attribute of another woman to her husband, that would lead to fitna. That would lead to, a situation that is not, not to be liked. With the end of it, what's going to end up happening from it. ومنها, and some of it is أن يقول في دعائه, for somebody, for him to say in his dua, in his supplication, will say, اللهم اغفر لي إن شئت وارحمني إن شئت. Ya Allah, اغفر لي, give me maghfirah, give me forgiveness if you want. Ya Allah, give me rahmah if you want. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, this is in hadith Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, in both Bukhari and Muslim. And the nass of the hadith actually says, none of you should be making this kind of dua, saying, Ya Allah, hamni, or firli in shit, or hamni in shit. Ya Allah, forgive me if you want to, give me rahmah if you want to. ولكن اجزم بالأمر. Ask and say, Ya Allah, firli, Ya Allah, hamni, Ya Allah, in this kind of, way that is definitely decisive, without saying, if you want, if you like to, whatever it is. ومنها, something else Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam also disliked very much, al-kathru min al-half, for somebody to swear a lot. Oh, by the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala this, this is, this way, by Allah is this, by Allah is this, by Allah is this, Wallahi is this, Wallahi. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam disliked that very much. And this one is from hadithi Abi Qatada al-Ansari min Sahih Muslim. He says, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, إِيَّاكُمْ وَكَثْرَةُ الْحَلْفِ فِي الْبَيْعِ فَإِنَّهُ يُنَفِّقُ ثُمَّ يَمْحَقُ. Do not make too much swearing when you are selling in state of sale. فَإِنَّهُ يُنْفِقُ أو يُنَفِّقُ. It is actually destroys and puts to demise, puts to destruction. And as well, and what it will do is ثُمَّ يَمْحَقْ. يَمْحَقْ is a slow death. Slow death eventually put somebody to slow death. And that's the end of it, what's going to end up happening. And this is also in Sahih Muslim. And from it is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he disliked it when somebody says, أَنْ يَسْأَلَ أَحَدًا بِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ, for him to swear to somebody or say, to ask somebody or something, they say, بِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ, by the face of Allah, by the existence of Allah, something like that. And this is hadith here in Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said in the hadith, لا يسأل بوجه الله إلا الجنة. Nobody should be asking with the existence of Allah, with the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, anything except the Jannah. But this hadith has been spoken about. And it is Abi Sa'id al-Tamimi. And Abi Sa'id al-Tamimi has been spoken about his authentication, about his memorization of the hadith. And from it also, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam disliked it very much when the Medina we know, is to be called Yathrib. Now that name is gone, is no longer in existence today, but in the days of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, it was called Yathrib before he made hijrah to it, before he moved to it, migrated to it from Mecca. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam changed the name from Yathrib. Yathrib was not a good name. It was in reference to the fact that it overwhelms the people with sickness and disease, because people used to get sick a lot in it. So when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam moved to it, changed the name to Medina, the city, the Medina. And from that day, this is the only name yet to be used. There's hadith, although that is hadith on da'if, but I want to mention to you because of how is the siyaq here. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam disliked for qawsu qazah, rainbow, the rainbow. He hated to be called qawsu qazah, to the one that you see in the sky. And this hadith on da'if. This hadith here is mentioned Abu Ni'ma in the Hilyat al-Awliya, the hadithi Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma. He says, لا تقول قوس قزح فإن قزح شيطان ولكن قول قوس الله عز وجل فهو أمان لأهل الأرض. And in the narration, there's Zakaria ibn Hakim al-Mati al-Habati al-Masri, and he is a halik. He used to make up hadith. So we should not be taking it. And the hadith, the meaning of the hadith is that you should not be saying qawsu qazah. The qazah is actually shaitan. So you should not be saying the bow, as exactly the same English would say rain, bow. It's also, قوس is bow, قزح الشيطان, but ولكن قولوا قوس الله. It is the bow of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because it belongs to him. فهو أمان لأهل الأرض. It is safety or some kind of security for people on earth. But again, this hadith on life. ومنها, what was something which has been said also. This one is hadith Hasan. Is رواه أبو داود. For somebody say صمت رمضان كله أو قمت الليل كله. For somebody say I fasted, I made siyam all Ramadan. And for me, I made qiyam all the night, or the entirety of the night. And this one is hadith عن أبي داود في الصوم, and من حديث أبو بكرة, وهو حديث معنعن, والله سبحانه وتعالى أعلم. Next chapter inshallah. في الألفاظ المكروهة, the things that was disliked to be said in the days of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, part of his hadith, is that الإفصاح عن الأشياء التي ينبغي الكناية عنها بأسمائها الصريحة. For you to say things by its names while you should be making reference to it without mentioning its name. Like what? Some of it, like reference, أطال الله بقاءك وأدام أيامك وعشت ألف سنة ونحو ذلك. Like you say, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make you to exist here on the face of this earth for a long time, or even forever. Or if you say, أدام أيامه, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make daymuma, make your, continuous, your days will be continuous, non-stopping. وعشت ألف ليلة, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you life for 1,000 nights. And something like that. Things that is not in its place. You should not be saying this to somebody. Say, Jazakallahu khairan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you jazak. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Give you the rahmah, give you maghfirah, like that. You don't tell him, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you 1,000 nights and extend your life to be for centuries and stuff like that. That would not give benefit, but give benefit from the time that it's been written for you overall. Some of it is what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam also disliked. أن يقول الصائم وحق الذي خاتمه على فم الكافر. And for you to say for somebody, and like making dua on the one who he's made the seal of it on the end of somebody who's kafir. For you to make dua to somebody who's making siyam in a different direction where you're supposed to be. Also, for somebody to say to the mufti, somebody who will give fatwa, for him to say, أحل الله كذا وحرم الله كذا في المسائل الاجتهادية وإنما يقول فيما ورد النص بتحريمه. And also, it is very much disliked for somebody who gives fatwa, for him to say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made this halal, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made that haram. And yet, things is not, we don't have an exact, clue. We don't have a proof that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned. So if there is something to be clued in, like ijtihad, like something to spend effort for you to extract the extractions from the rules, it should be mentioned as such. You say, what, because of this, I'm ruling this way. You should not be saying that this is haram and this is halal. Because that will imply that you are the one although that whoever the mufti is, whoever gives the fatwa, at this point implies that his opinion is the halal, and his opinion is the one that makes it haram. And yet, it's only his own opinion. He should mention it as such. He should give reference to himself, say, I think because of this is the right thing to do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. He should not be saying it, this is halal and this is haram overall. ومنها, and some of it is what is disliked, أن يسمى أدلة القرآن والسنة ظواهر لفظية ومجازات. For him to mention that the clues and the proofs in the Quran, to call it ظواهر لفظية, it is something in reference to something else. It's a metaphor. It is something that is a copy of from the language or something like that. And when you say that, you are taking down the importance and the placement uh, of the the Quran from the hearts of the people. Like, for you to say, for somebody to say, you know what, it's a metaphor, the story of, like, let's say, that person who was passing around in the dead city in, Surah Al-Baqarah, passing by the dead city, and he says, how would it be, be raised? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put him to death for, and this is Azar, this is the story of Azar, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put him to death for 100 years, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resurrected him, and he saw his own food and he saw his own donkey. They said this is a metaphor. This is really not a story about this, it's a story about something else. So that takes the placement of the Quran out of the hearts of the people and the respect of the Quran out of the hearts of the people. Everything in the Quran and the Sunnah should be taken as verbatim, as exactly what it is, should be understood as such, should have the greatest placement, and we should not be referencing it as throughout our conversations as casual conversations. This is something to be respected, to be placed in the highest placement in our talk and our conversations, and on and on. And also, and from it we take today, like, can you imagine somebody who would take, a few words of the Quran, or chapter, or even one ayah or one verse, and you would actually include it as part of a song, or part of a chant, or part of something of that nature. That would actually bring down the value of the Quran and will put some kind of disgrace to it overall. فصل, another chapter, inshallah. أن يحدث الرجل بجماع أهله وما يكون بينه وبينها. For somebody to talk about, he actually spend a physical time with his family, and vice versa. A wife will talk about a husband, a husband talks about a wife. This is a private conversation. It's not to be brought up in front of people, no matter who they are or what they are. And also, what things is going on between a husband and wife should not be brought up. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This one is hadith Sahih Muslim, is mentioned, and also Ahmad wa Ibn Sinni wal Bayhaqi, min hadith Abi Sa'id al-Khudri, or Abi Sa'id al-Khidri. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, the hadith is verbatim, is إن من أشر الناس عند الله منزلة يوم القيامة الرجل يفضي إلى امرأته وتفضي إليه ثم ينشر سرها. One of the most evil, or the worst people placement in the day of judgment, is that for somebody who talks to his wife and she talks to him, she tells her his secrets and she tells him his secrets, and then he goes out and he tells the whole world with her secret. وَمِمَّا يُكْرَهُ مِنَ الْأَلْفَاظِ, and something is that something, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam disliked to be used is زَعَمُوا وَذَكَرُوا وَقَالُوا وَنَحْوَهُ. And for somebody say they claim, or they mention, or they say, وَنَحْوَهُ, as this. And this one here, the hadith is in Abu Dawood, Al-Bukhari, Al-Adab Al-Mufrad, also Zuhd Al-Tahawi. And this one is in Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. He says to Abi Abdullah, the two are talking, he says, ما سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول فيما زعم. He said, have you ever heard Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم saying something about they claim or they say? He says, بئس مطية الرجل زعم. He said, what is the worst place for somebody to climb on or jump on is they claim or they say. And the meaning here is that if I want to bring credibility into my conversation, how would I bring that in? I would say, you know what? Like whatever I say, the Quran has an ayah. That's great credibility. I'm bringing something proof into the conversation. How about if I bring in a hadith? Very good. How about if I don't have anything and I start to bring in something, say, oh, somebody said, well, not specifically somebody. I say, they say, it's been said, something like that. So it kind of brings in credibility to a conversation that actually it has no credibility to it. So it should not be mentioned as such. If somebody said it, mention who it is, and you go from there. And the last one is for you to say Khalifatullah, the Khalifa of Allah. وَنَائِبُ اللَّهِ فِي الْأَرْضِ is the viceroy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the earth. فَإِنَّ الْخَلِيفَةَ وَالنَّائِبُ إِنَّمَا يَكُونُ فِي الْغَالِبِ. This is a very important point. Our author here kind of mentioned it in 2 lines only in this chapter. But actually, it's a very big subject and it's a very important subject. It goes back into Surah Al-Baqarah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to the angels and he says, I am making Khalifa on earth. If you look at the tafsir, some of the tafsir says, Khalifatullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Khalifa for him on earth as a substitute for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth, somebody who takes his place. And that is fihi dhulmun azim, that's a great transgression. Nobody can replace Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the face of this earth. He is observant of everything. He's watching everything. He is not absent. When you say Khalifa, in this meaning, is that what the actual meaning of Khalifa mean that somebody yakhlifu ba'dahum ba'da. For you to say a first generation would die, the other generation will be Khalifa for the first generation because the first generation is gone. They either died or incapacitated or they're disabled or they got hit with some kind of disability. They're not able to perform their jobs. And this is what we are here on the face of this earth. So when the father dies, goes into a coma, or he goes into disability, or he's not able to perform anything because of old age, his son will become the Khalifa. So automatically, when you say Khalifa, it automatically implies the disability or the absence of the somebody who you are making khalaf to. And how could you say that Khalifatullah fil ard? That is a huge transgression. So it would you say yakhlifu ba'dahum ba'da, they are actually replacing each other. And this is exactly what happens. You know, the father, he passes away, he goes into a sickness, disease, disability, old age, whatever it is. So he leaves everything that he has for the Khalifa, for the next person to take over, including his knowledge, including his language, including his money, including his inheritance, and on and on. And the next generation would pick up, everything from this point and improve on it, or possibly lose it, whatever the situation is, and he will eventually give it to the next Khalifa, and on and on. From this meaning, we know when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he passed away, so they called Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, they called him Khalifatu Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Who's the Khalifa? Who's the one who took his place? He's the one who took his place. Well, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Omar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he was called Khalifatu Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the Khalifa of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, but got to be too long, Khalifa. So they looked at each other, they called him, Ya Amirul Mu'mineen, oh, you are the Amir, you are the one who gave orders, you are the ones in charge of the Mu'mineen. He looked at him and said, where did you get that from? He says, we are the Mu'mineen, we are the believers, and you are our Amir. So he agreed to it. Otherwise, we would be calling Khalifa until, every somebody would come in, would have a 10,000, 20,000, whatever it is, names that come with. Saying Khalifatullah fil ard is very much disliked because it implies that somebody who's making khilafatu, he's disabled, or incapacitated, or he has some kind of issue that disables him from performing his jobs. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never be in that situation. والله سبحانه وتعالى هو خليفة الغائب في أهله is actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Khalifa, is the one who takes, or he is in the place of somebody when he takes off, he goes on travel. He's the one who is always there for his family, for his, everybody there in his household. He's the one who supports, he's the one who, sustains, he's the one who gives all the needs for his family. The last chapter in this fasl is وَلْيَحْذَرِ كُلَّ الْحَذْرِ, and for somebody to be very cautious and very, 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 in a lookout من طغياني, from the transgression of أنا, me, ولي, to me or mine, وعندي, I have, these three things. فإن هذه الألفاظ الثلاثة, and this is beautiful how you described it, these three things, me and mine and what I have, what's with me, عندي, أنا, ولي, وعندي, three things. He says, تلك الألفاظ الثلاثة ابتلي بها إبليس. Iblis was hit with these three things. And Fir'aun and Qarun, they said this. What did Iblis say? أنا خير منه. He says, I am better than him. The minute he said that, he is doomed because of his arrogance. And Fir'aun says, وَلِي مِلْكُ مِصْرٍ. And for me, I have the kingdom, the ownership of Misr, of Egypt. That is Fir'aun. And he's also doomed because of saying what he said. And then Qarun says about his wealth, he says, وَإِنَّمَا أُوتِيتُهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ عِنْدِي. He says, I've been given with this because of knowledge I have. Three things. أنا, wali, وعندي. These three things nobody should ever, or everybody should be extremely cautious when he uses and utilizes. وأحسن ما وضعت أنا في قول العبد. And the best thing you could use أنا as me. You say أنا العبد المذنب. I am the abd. I am the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sinful one who committed transgression. المخطئ, the one who made mistakes. المستغفر, the one who asked for forgiveness, asked for istighfar. والمعترف, and the one who admits. ونحوه. You could use it like that, but you need to be cautious. That's why you notice that this heading is under be cautious, be careful, be very in the lookout for these words, how you use them. Iblis, Qarun, Fir'aun, use these three words in the context that brought them into demise, brought them into problems. For us, if we use them, we have to be very careful. We use them in the right places, like that. وَنَحْوَ قَوْلِهِ, and they'll say, li, what I have is, li al-dhanb, I have the sin. وَلِي al-jurm, and I have the crime. وَلِي al-maskana, and I have the complete humbleness. وَلِي الْفَقْرُ وَالذِّلُّ, and I have the complete poverty, and I have the complete, submission. وعندي, the example of saying عندي, which is, allowed, or it should be said, اللهم اغفر لي في قوله, and this is the hadith, اغفر لي جدي وهزلي وخطئي وعمدي وكل ذلك عندي. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he says, Allahumma, forgive my seriousness and forgive my joking or humorous ways, what I say, وخطئي, and forgive my mistake, and وعمدي, and everything that is intentional or non-intentional, وكل ذلك عندي, and all that is with me. You could say that like that as such. Be very careful of these three words and how you use them. I have, me, versus you say it, you use it in the rightful way, is good. You say mine, versus you say the other one. وعندي is what I have and what I own. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us and forgive our mistakes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, increase our knowledge and give us, inshallah, the full knowledge of the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Inshallah, we move on to the next chapter. This is the end of the juz', the number 2. Now we're going to go into the 3. Number 3 it goes into immediately في هديه, the guidance of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, في الجهاد والمغازي والسرايا والبعوث. الجهاد, the effort you spend for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jihad. والمغازي, when he غزو his battles, the battles of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. والسرايا, saraya is when he used to send the Sahaba out in outings and he was not present. It's called Sariya. Plural, Saraya. والبعوث, Bu'uth is plural from Ba'ath, is that when he sent people for specific missions and honor. Our author here starts this section and he's saying, لما كان الجهاد ذروة سنام الإسلام وقبته. When the jihad, spending this kind of effort, it is the highest point of the hump as we say, Sunan, as we say, is the hump of the camel, is the highest point of the camel, the highest point. Sunan, the highest point in Islam is jihad. Well, وَقُبَّتَهُ is the dome. The ultimate point of the dome of the roof is the jihad. وَمَنَازِلُ أَهْلِهِ, and the placement of the people who make this kind of jihad, this kind of effort. أعلى المنازل, they are the highest placement في الجنة, in the Jannah. كما لهم الرفعة في الدنيا, as well as they have the highest placements here on earth. فهم الأعلون في الدنيا والآخرة, they are the highest places. These are the people who are spending their time, spending effort for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have the highest places here on the face of this earth and in the life after also as well. كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, كان في الذروة العليا, he was in the highest placement in this category specifically. واستولى على أنواعه كلها فجاهد في الله حق جهاده بالقلب والجنان والدعوة واللسان. And he, took over all the types of jihad, of all its variety, of all its types and performances. And he made the true jihad, the true effort for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with his heart, with his, body, and in the da'wah for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He spent the effort in bayan, the explanation, and the eloquence of his speech. Was Sayfi, and also when he was holding a sword. Was Sinan, when he was holding spears or arrows. وكانت, and his hours موقوفة على الجهاد. All his hours was spent on jihad, on jihad, and effort was spent for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with his heart, with his tongue, with his hand. ولهذا كان أرفع العالمين ذكرًا, and that's why he was the highest mentioned of any human being on the face of this earth. وأعظمهم عند الله قدرًا, and he had the highest placement with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Brothers and sisters, don't think for a moment that the placement of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, not only because he's the chosen one, not because he's chosen to be a prophet. Absolutely. He's the seal of all prophets. Yes. And because of all his attributes, because of his abilities, because of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had him, entrusted him to. Yes. But also because of something very important, because of the effort he spent for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No man has ever spent this kind of effort, even though in a short period of time, if you want to compare it to the days of Nuh alayhi salam, if you want to compare it to the other times of other prophets from different times. But Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, within the short duration of 23 years, he established the highest ranking of any human being as far as the effort, the jihad, with his heart, with his tongue, and with his hand. He's the one who stood there and he spent, and subhanAllah, you notice, actually, and this is a great ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that with his will, his prophet was able to turn the entire humanity 180 degrees from the path of wrong, the path of evil, the path of shaitan, where people took advantage of each other, when there is no civility, there is no commonality in good, everything was going in the wrong direction. And yet with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was able to spend 23 years here on the face of this earth, spreading this Islam, and he was able to turn humanity in an entirely different direction, in the direction of good, direction of greatness, great direction of the execution and the doing the work of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by hand, with his effort, with his work. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has rewarded him by mentioning and raising his status here on the face of this earth, as well as he has the highest status in the life after. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered him to spend jihad, to spend effort, when he gave him the mission, when he gave him the wahy, or the revelation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْ شِئْنَا لَبَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ قَرْيَةٍ نَذِيرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Quran, if we wanted, we would have sent in every qaryah, in every village, in every metropolis, nadhir, somebody to warn them. فَلَا تُطِعِ الْكَافِرِينَ, do not obey the kafirin. وَجَاهِدْهُمْ جِهَادًا كَبِيرًا, and make jihad with them. Jihad, huge jihad, big effort for his sake. And also فهذه سورة مكية. And this surah here, Surah Al-Furqan, Surah Makkiyah, it was actually revealed in Mecca. And also jihad munafiqin, for him to spend the jihad and the effort with the hypocrites, is also, it is by tabligh al-hujjah, for him to make him reach out for the proof and the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وإلا إنهم تحت قهر أهل الإسلام, or they will be under the persecution of the people of Muslimin, if we don't make this message reach out to the hypocrites, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قال تعالى, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها النبي جاهد الكفار والمنافقين واغلظ عليهم ومأواهم جهنم وساءت مصيرا وبئس المصير. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها النبي, O you prophet, جاهد الكفار والمنافقين, make jihad, may spend effort with the kuffar, the ones who denounced, the ones who are rejecting, and munafiqeen, the hypocrites, the kuffar and the munafiqeen. وَغْلُظْ عَلَيْهِمْ, be rough with them, be tough with them. وَمَأْوَاهُمْ جَهَنَّمْ, the hellfire is their destination. وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرُ, and that is the worst place they can be. Surah At-Tawbah. فَجِهَادُ الْمُنَافِقِينَ, the jihad, the effort you spend with the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, is the most difficult. It is actually more difficult than the jihad of the kuffar. And وَهُوَ جِهَادُ خَوَاصُ الْأُمَّةِ, it's very special people who make this kind of jihad, this kind of work, who are making jihad with the munafiqeen, the hypocrites. And they are the ones who truly are inheritors of the messengers and their teachings, the ones who truly make this kind of jihad, the jihad of munafiqeen. وَالْقَائِمُونَ بِهِ, the ones who truly make this kind of jihad are few in this face of this earth, and the ones who join them in this kind of effort, and the ones who help on it. And even though there are few of them, but they are the highest ranking overall in the types of jihad in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَمَّا كَانَ, and because the best kind of jihad is قَوْلُ الْحَقِّ مَعَ شِدَّةُ الْمُعَارِضِ, when you say something right in front of somebody who is the most powerful in objector. Mu'arid is the objector. He's shadid, he's strong, he has strength. مثل أن تتكلم به عند من تخاف سطوته وذا. For you to say, like as an example, for you to say the haqq in front of somebody who you are afraid of his harm, what he could do to you or he could say to you. كان للرسل, that's why for the prophets and the messengers, as well, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as well as the rest of all the messengers, they have the highest ranking from this kind of behavior, from this kind of work. For our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he perfected this kind of jihad. He perfected this kind of effort that he spent for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As well as we will be reading and translating and explaining this book, you're going to realize gradually but surely that the jihad is not what you think of here today. Unfortunately, today that's what is being demonized, and it's been, put in a bad spot. And it's actually, even in all the civilized world today, the people who spend effort for the good causes, the great causes, any good kind of good effort, they are the most admired. They are the ones who are most cherished. They're the ones who, have the greatest placement in our communities. But subhanAllah, you notice also that once we start translating more and more, we're talking about this book more and more, you realize that, killing and harming, and, that's a very small portion of the effort. The biggest portion of it, the greatest portion of it is actually words to be said, positions to be taken, words to be written, positions to be held on to, and advice to be made in the right place, in the correct, in the right place. And this is the type of jihad, this kind of effort. And the absolute opposite of it, for somebody not to spend any effort whatsoever, to become kind of completely inactive, completely dormant, or neutral in the community, that is the worst position anybody could be in at this point. And from there we keep going inshallah with this section. It says ولما كان جهاد أعداء الله في الخارج فرعا على جهاد العبد نفسه في ذات الله. As this hadith is المجاهد كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, from the hadith, as from somebody who makes jihad, spend an effort towards this kind of effort, forwarded towards the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the to spend it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He should be, and this is the only portion of it, also part of the juhd, part of the effort is he should be spending it within himself, on himself. And this the hadith is al-mujahidu man jahada nafsahu fi ta'atillah. Al-mujahid, who truly spend the effort for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the ta'ah and the obedience and listening to the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالْمُهَاجِرُ مَنْ هَجَرَ مَا نَهَى اللَّهُ عَنْهُ. The true muhajir, and the one who makes hijrah, who migrate away from, is the one who make hijrah away from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered him not to do, not to perform. This hadith here, أخرجه أحمد, is mentioned in Sahih Ahmad, من حديث فضالة بن عبيد. فضالة بن عبيد, he says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في حجة الوداع. In the حجة الوداع, he said the hadith, he says, ألا أخبركم بالمؤمن. Wouldn't I tell you who the true mu'min is? He says, من أمينه الناس على أموالهم وأنفسهم. Somebody, when people has entrusted him on their lives and their money. والمسلم, المسلم is من سلم الناس من لسانه ويده. The Muslim is who people feel safe from his lisan, from his tongue and from his hand. والمجاهد من جاهد نفسه في طاعة الله. And the mujahid, the true mujahid, the one who spend effort for or he spent effort against himself or within himself in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. والمهاجر من هجر الخطايا والذنوب. And somebody who is through muhajir, made hijrah, migrated away from sins and mistakes. And this one is sanaduhu jayyid, is a good sahih hadith overall. From this, our author says, كان جهاد النفس مقدما على جهاد العدو في الخارج, is that what takes priority is for you to take jihad, to spend an effort on yourself, within yourself, before, or takes priority to spending an effort on somebody outside for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as through the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at this point. And that was the source of it, that's the origins of it. فمن لم يجاهد نفسه أولا لتفعل ما أمرت به وتترك ما نهيت عنه. Anybody who did not spend an effort within himself to stop himself from what his self desires and wants, and orders himself to do things in the good path, what's been ordered to, and fight his own self, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's no way for him to make jihad, to make an effort, for him to fight his enemies outside of himself. How would he be able to fight the enemies outside if he cannot fight his own self? We cannot subdue his own self, would not be able to spend the effort on his own self for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It says, وَعَدُوهُ, and his true enemy, the one that is within himself, is actually subduing him. How can he fight the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? His own enemy is within himself. And he's actually taken over himself. And he did not fight him. He did not spend any effort against him. And he did not fight it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no way for him to be able to go out to his enemies outside until he fights his own self, until he spends effort on his own, against his own lusts and desires, and spend the effort for him to perfect his, actions and his deeds. These two enemies, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has tested mankind with. The enemies, these two enemies, the enemies the outside and the enemies within themselves. And he says, وَبَيْنَهُمَا, and between them there's a third enemy. There's no way to fight either one of these enemies without fighting that enemy. And he is standing there between them. He's trying to frustrate, trying to dissuade the person from making this kind of jihad. And he is letting him down. And he is, working so hard to, to put down his effort for his sake. And this is the shaitan. This is the work of shaitan. This is the enemy in between. So قال تعالى إن الله إن الشيطان لكم عدو فاتخذوه عدوا. The shaitan is your enemy. Make an enemy out of him. And Surah Fatir in ayah number 6. والأمر باتخاذه عدوا تنبيه على استفراغ الوسع في محاربته ومجاهدته. And for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to say specifically in this ayah number 6 in Surah Fatir that the shaitan is your enemy is actually pushing us not only to make an enemy out of him, is for us to spend an effort to fight him, an effort to make jihad against him, to spend an effort in, to get him away from us or to fight his effects on us. Because this enemy, the shaitan, would not let go, would not slow down. And he will never stop in the fighting and the abid as long as the person is breathing or he is actually in any kind of status or any kind of way that he is living. The shaitan is always going after him. فهذه ثلاثة أعداء. This is the three enemies. The enemies on the outside, the enemies between kuffar and munafiqeen, that's the type of jihad. The enemy in the inside, which is inside somebody's self, is with his lust and desires and wantings and on and on. And the third one is the shaitan, who's right there in between, who's accompanying mankind anywhere and everywhere and trying to put him away from his cause and put him away from his purpose and trying to dissuade him, frustrate him, and put his efforts away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered us to fight these three enemies, and that is the type of jihad. This is the kind of jihad. And we have been entrusted, we have been tested to fight them in this earthly life. And it was a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is ibtila, it is a fitna and ibtila from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the man madadan wa awnan. He's given him help and give him assistance and give him and he has armed him for this type of jihad. And he has given also as well the enemies, his enemies, also madadan wa iddatan wa awana wa silahan. He has also given the enemies of the man or the good servant, they're his enemies, between the exterior enemies, the interior enemies, and the shaitan. Give him also a help or some kind of weapons or some kind of ways for them to get their ways also as well. وَبَلَى أَحَدَ الْفَرِيقَيْنِ بِالْآخَرِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested each one with each other, made it ibtila, made a test with them, and made them a fitna, made them a some type of test, لِيَبْلُوَ أَخْبَارَهُم, for him to test their news and test what are they going to do. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be testing the ones who are standing on his side, and who is the ones going to be standing by the side of his prophets and messengers, and the ones who will be standing on the side of shaitan and the ways of shaitan on the other side. كما قال تعالى, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Furqan, ayah number 20, وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً أَتَصْبِرُونَ وَكَانَ رَبُّكَ بَصِيرًا. We have made you, all of you, towards each other. Fitna, test, severe test. أَتَصْبِرُونَ, are you going to have patience? Are you going to, be able to perform? وَكَانَ رَبُّكَ بَصِيرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching everything that's happening between them. And then the other ayah in Surah Muhammad, as the ayah says, ذَلِكَ وَلَوْ يَشَاءُ اللَّهُ لَانْتَصَرَ مِنْهُمْ. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills and wants, He would have taken victory from them. وَلَكِنْ لِيَبْلُوَ بَعْضَكُمْ بِبَعْضٍ. But for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make bala from you against each other. And this is the true test here on the face of the earth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the ayah, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, and we will test you, حتى نعلم المجاهدين منكم والصابرين ونبلو أخباركم. We will test you until we would know the ones who truly spend the effort for our sake, and the ones who have patience, who have sabr, وَنَبْلُوَ أَخْبَارَكُمْ, and we will test your news and your outcome of what you have done. فأعطى عباده, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave his ibad, gave us al-asma' wal-absar. He's given us the hearing and the seeing and absar. وَالْعُقُولُ وَالْقُوَى, and he gave us the brains and the minds, and he gave us the strength. وَأَنزَلَ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also brought upon us his books, and he has sent us his messengers, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has helped us with the help of the angels overall. And he told them, he says, إِنِّي مَعَكُمْ فَثَبِّتُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. I am with you. فَثَبِّتُوا, that's the work of the malaika, the angels, to make tathbeet, to fixate the mu'min on his iman, the believer on his iman and his belief. وَأَمَرَهُمْ من من أمره ما هو أعظم العون لهم على حرب عدوهم. And he has ordered them from his orders, from his instructions, with the greatest thing to be the greatest help to them on the war against their enemies, the two enemies or the three enemies on the outside. And he has told them, he has informed mankind that if they obey and listen and they follow the instructions, what he has ordered them to do, they will always be victorious against their enemies and his enemies and their enemies. And any of them who has given him power upon them, because these enemies have power upon them, or they're able to defeat them, is because they have left his orders and they have left his instructions and they have disobeyed him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not support them, would not help them at this point. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even they go through the situation, has ordered them to stay steadfast, to come back to the straight path, and to always come back to the fight, always come back to the work and the effort for the jihad, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and these three enemies overall. And for them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always be in them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with them, will always be helpful to them, will always be on their side. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is with the muttaqeen, he is with the muhsineen, and with the sabirin, the patient ones who have ihsan, the ones who have tuqa, and with the true believers. And he is the one who is gonna defend the true servants, his true servants, and the ones who are unable to defend themselves. And by him being on their side, they will have victory, they will have the ultimate success against their enemy. And without his defense, without his help, without his immense support, they will be taken away by their enemies, and they will be completely gone, or will be completely going through demise and destruction without his help. This mudafa and this help is according to their iman, according to their faith, according to their belief. And it depends on how high it is and how low it is. فإن كان قوي الإيمان, if his iman is strong, mudafa, the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be strong. فمن وجد خيرا, anybody who found something good, فليحمد الله, make hamd, be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ومن وجد غير ذلك, anybody who found something else other than that, فلا يلومن إلا نفسه, he should not blame anybody else but himself. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very interesting conversation, is very interesting subject, and our author is spending enormous amount of time and effort for him to explain to us these three concepts, the concept of jihad, and for the true concept of jihad in our Islam, and to make it clear in our minds and make us understand that there's no way that we could achieve the success here on the face of this earth or the success on the life after unless we spend effort for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for us to spend it wholeheartedly, sincerely, and following the examples of the rest of the prophets and messengers, what they have done, what they have said. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open our hearts and our minds. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, give us the true teaching, the true knowledge of Iman and Islam, and make us from the successful ones here on the face